Okay, now I've got a whole bunch of your press releases up here that I wanted to ask you about. So let's talk about Dr. Ware.
Yeah.
What's the accretive value of his participation?
So early on, many years ago, we thought it'd be a great idea to have Dr. Ware as a medical advisor, and he thought it would be a not great idea. And so we've always thought highly of him. Over time, he interacted with us in Canopy Health. He and Mark Wayne, who was the head of Bedger Canada, the head of Canopy Health, have had a long personal relationship, worked together on CCIC, so they knew each other. And I think as he got really engaged with the commercialization, it became really interesting to him, right? This is the one step, and now you're at the finish line. And so he now will become, at least for the next year, and probably longer on a sabbatical basis, or permanent, the chief medical officer, which means looking at which indications, the trial structures, and really meshing together all of the elements that get you to the finish point of having drug identification number and or NHP products.
Okay, so the idea of cannabis becoming an insured product with a drug identification number, what is the status of that? And I ask that because we have a great number of veterans and other people who rely on cannabis as medicine, yet a lot of them still are not able to recover the costs or at least manage the costs through an insurance program.
And so we're working in programs that will get there if the results merit getting there, and we think they will. But there's no real shortcut, right? You have to show that the ingredients are stabilized. You have to have a drug master file. You have to. And each of these are steps, and each of them are often almost entirely sequential. Some can be almost concurrently done. And the effect is it takes a bit of time, but we've had the clock running for some time. And once you knock one in, I think you're going to find insurers extremely happy to pay because the relative cost of our solution, and I'm not talking here's a plant.
Right.
I'm talking extracted combinations and delivery mechanisms so you can actually have a dosage control against an indication and get the response that says this merits being covered and it's repeatable. But when you get there, our choice has way less downside, we believe, and way less cost to the insurer. So can you imagine that they're not going to be saying, yes, we'd love to do that? So I don't think you're going to find stigma is nearly as big for insurers where dollar signs are better.
Right.
And so I think this will go quite rapidly through the market once it's there. And then you're going to start looking at where are all the points it disrupts. And when you start to be able to compare it on an absolute equivalent cost basis to the patients, I think the medical market gets to be quite a bit different.
Sure, you bet. That's interesting. You also, you were talking about the buying the rest of the companies that you didn't own. So the BC Tweed acquisition in particular, that was essentially $1 billion acquisition in total, or the $374 million was the total acquisition value?
So it's a total acquisition value. For $374 million, we essentially buy call it a 1.5 million square foot licensed greenhouse in Canada. So that's not a bad deal. And what it does is it gives us, on a go-forward basis, we issued shares today so that when we're reporting margin in the future, 100% of it will show up as our margin. Where previously we owned 66% of the resulting margin and they own 1/3.
Wow.
And I bet when I come back in a year or two and people are actually counting things like top line, bottom line, and contributed margin by operation level, it'll be beneficial to have that 1/3 folded back in and it'll look like a relatively good deal in today's stock.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing that I saw that I really liked was the Canopy Rivers. It was announced under Canopy Growth, but Canopy Rivers has launched this pitch day, which I first looked at and I thought, well, that's interesting. Bruce is starting a game show for cannabis.
There will be
investors.
some people you recognize, I think, helping out.
So this is the interesting thing. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, this is actually very crafty because you're getting people who have great ideas that maybe haven't been heard from out there, and they're going to come and see you first. And is that the thinking that went into that?
Sure, there's a bit of that, and we get a lot of traffic at Rivers, but I think there's a bit of that. There's also put your money where your mouth is. We actually do support small grow, craft grow, and we can give them a vertical offtake that allows them to make a meaningful living off a very small production asset on an indoor basis. That will mean that there can be boutique growers. And so the point of the exercise is if you're boutique, you can carve $1 million up into a number of little pieces, help people get going, structure them into a supply, I'll call it a supply chain or offtake, and you can actually run a business. And so I think it's kind of, it's good for ideas, but it's also good to say that, yeah, we support small grow and we're doing this.
Sure. From that perspective, is there any holes in the cannabis industry you see that you think, wow, somebody should do that? That would be a great opportunity. I'd do it, except I'm running a $6 billion company.
Well, there's a few that I can't tell you about because we're working on them, because after you do a lot of scale production, you start realizing there's a big difference between 35,000 square feet, 350,000 square feet, and 3.5 million square feet in everything from how you propagate to how you fertilize to how you harvest to how you package. And so there's a few things at scale that we're looking at. I would say if you're going to give somebody who's sort of an entrepreneur or a smallish business person,
Right.
you know, I don't think we can throw more money at vapes and lighting. There's been tons thrown there.
Right.
But, you know, start looking at, I'll call it, each country wants to know chain of custody. So if you're a software person, I haven't seen a unified method they're going to globally use. And so they could maybe take a page from, I'll call it, some blockchain strategies and some of that, because we're hearing a lot of talk about it. I haven't seen anything legitimately operating.
Oh, so you don't have a blockchain strategy yet?
No, you know, at the end of the day, if our traceability and chain of custody is working sufficiently well that it meets all regulatory requirements, and it's less costly than operating some other system, I'm going to stay with that one.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you can't make one better and less costly.
Sure.
You know, I think there's a lot of people fussing around with fertilizers, and that's not a bad space to work, because, you know, we all use a lot of fertigation for these things, and that I don't know that anybody's absolutely crushed it and has the best. We mix our own, but would we like better, more stable ingredients, more soluble ingredients? For sure.
So do you actually spend a lot of time, I mean, I'm sure you don't personally, but does your research division spend a lot of time experimenting with different nutrient light, CO2 benefication strategies?
Yeah, since at least the last 5 years, we have had an R&D area which has had funding from various federal and provincial governments, worked, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 universities, a couple of colleges, and we have tested the hell out of everything from lights to fertilizers. And, you know, part of it is you have to run every play to the end, because most often the claims made have very little scientific evidence. And so we have to make sure we agree.
Right.
And for the most part, we've tried to run our business where we ask the plants.
Oh,
Right?
good.
Like it's
You talk to the plants too, do you?
You can say that they like this and they can say that they like that. Well, why don't we just run an A/B every time?
Interesting. Going back to your listing on the NYSE, you've always stated very clearly that Canopy has no ambition for the United States because it's federally illegal there. Now you're a U.S. publicly traded company, and there are some initiatives in different levels of Congress and Senates making moves towards potentially deprohibition at the federal level.
Yep.
Is there an ambition now to go into the United States?
Well, so we have every intention of being in every market which is federally legal and being as dominant as we can be. And so I am extremely excited about it being in the U.S. if and when it's fully legal. And so our go bag is about going there, not running away. And when you do stuff that's federally illegal, usually your go bag is about getting away.
Right.
And so think of us as preparing a whole bunch of optionality. You know, even we disclosed in the context of the BC greenhouse, they have a greenhouse that's in California that's pretty ginormous.
Really?
And it's growing currently, I guess, some fairly happy tomatoes. But if and when it was federally legal, that would be something that we would have now established a cap on purchase price and be able to be in there pretty much instantly. But I'm not in there doing anything except hoping their tomatoes are profitable in the current period. In the future, when we want it, it's ready to go.
Right.
As an example.
That's interesting. Let's talk about Tweed Main Street finally. I know you're going to head back to Ottawa tonight. Tweed Main Street, you've got all these fantastic medical brands. There's, you know, obviously something for everyone there. There's no real sign yet of the recreational sort of strategy. And
Well,
is that something you're hesitating to roll out until rec sets in?
I would say when you log in at tweed.com or Tweed Main Street, particularly tweed.com, you'll start seeing quite a bit more. So go to tweed.com, try that one out. Really, Tweed is a narrative, it is a story. A brand can't just be something you hire an agency to come up with. And so Tweed's kind of built and lived, you know, creating who we are, interacting with towns the way we do, trying to change the sector in the way we are. And so, Tweed.com will start giving you sort of a bit more of how it feels to interact with Tweed when I would say we're a little bit more focused through spectrum on the patient and Tweed on the party.
Interesting. So then
You like these now, yeah?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. You said when you were being interviewed by Jim Cramer.
Which was pretty cool. I like being here. It's another Jim. It's almost the same.
Yeah, I don't have any of those buttons. I'm thinking of getting some now, though. But anyway, so you said during that interview, you said that, well, we're going to have to worry about this issue of whether or not we're taking business away from the alcohol industry is something we won't have to worry about, and you said until September, which to me sounded like you had more information about the launch of the federal rules than everybody else.
Well, no, but I do try to read them carefully, right? So if I presented to Senate last Wednesday, I think the vote will occur and on schedule, and I think it'll probably be like a 38 to 24 kind of thing. I don't think it's going to be a massive close thing. And then by July 1, they'll have taken the necessary steps, so it will officially have passed.
Right.
And they've signaled that they need 6 to 8 weeks following it being fully passed for the provinces to be legally allowed to acquire the cannabis and stock the channel.
Okay.
So if you start on July 1 and you have 6 to 8 weeks, that means sometime in late August, early September, the first sales should occur at the first provinces that are ready.
Right.
And we've been fortunate to be selected in every province that's made an announced selection. And I think all those ones that have made announcements are very orderly and ready to go. They just need the green light so we can actually transit cannabis from our facility to theirs.
Wow. A couple of comments from the crowd it's on YouTube. It's Waiting in Weed says, "In Bruce we trust." So you've got some real supporters out there, and you might be happy to know, but maybe your wife won't be, that Fallon Snow says, "What a cutie patootie." Pretty sure she's talking about you, not me.
I'm glad they have the low resolution camera going today.
But let's see. So Filthy Cassius says they missed the Tweed T-shirt.
Oh, it's around, man. We have announced, I think, the Newfoundland retail stores, Manitoba. We're in the lottery in Saskatchewan. We've been in the bid in Alberta. We're working hard on New Brunswick. All the places and everywhere those stores exist, we're going to have a great array of merch.
Oh, cool.
And, every time we bring out something else different, everybody still comes back and says, I got to have one of those Tweed shirts.
Yeah.
And if they're going to have like an every second day shirt, they want the high one.
Right. Right.
And I love when you look in the collar at the back, when you get your Tweed shirt, read the fine print because it says, wash when dirty, hang to dry. If it shrinks, give it to someone smaller and call us for another one. And so that's kind of the way it's always got to be.
Yeah.
In that we want people to wear our shirts, but we want to know they should know why they're wearing them. And they're wearing because we've tried to do good things in little towns. We've tried to play by the rules. We've tried to create a company that didn't put a press release out to tell you we're going to do work. We told you when we're done the work.
Sure.
And so we've really been, I think, genuine in being disciplined about actually delivering what we said we'd do. And we think we've got quite a lot ahead to do. And we're kind of, I don't think there's any absence of motivation, just sleep.
Yeah, no, I can hear it in your voice. You sound like you've been traveling forever.
I think I'm super elite, or almost super elite again this year. But what's happening is it's execute what's ahead of us in Canada.
Right.
We had our global management meeting on Friday, and what we know what we have to do in Canada. We just have to do it. Then in medical, we have to build more, make it bigger, stronger, smarter, more protected, more complete. And then internationally, we have to push the pace and the agenda so that we don't end up someplace we'd be disappointed because we casually allowed it to occur.
Right. There's a gentleman here, Stephen Coe, it says, "Hi, Bruce. I'm currently an AI researcher / data scientist, and he's wondering if you have any intention of entering that space using the customer metrics derived from cannabis sales."
So we have looked at, quite a bit of data from our patients because we ask our patients stuff. So we surveyed, I think the most recent one was 6,000 or 7,000 patients. And we asked them some very open-ended questions like, why do you buy cannabis? What ailment are you trying to resolve? How frequently do you consume it? How do you consume it? What effect, what duration effect? And so when you start overlaying that with the visibility we have on what strains they bought, then you can start to look in the underlying profiles to determine this one's hitting the target for the most people. Now let's start to do an A/B analysis where we in extraction include or exclude certain of those cannabinoids and or terpenes.
Right.
And so that data set he's talking about, we're tweaking and playing around at the edge, it does lead to what you want to use as your medical first steps. Because if you go into like a 2B trial or a 2A trial, you do not want to miss. So you want to make sure you're dialed in on it. So I'd say we're doing that. I think weirdly where we've used more AI has been when you have macro scale heating and cooling systems, you have a whole bunch of lighting systems. What you need to be able to do is make sure that all of that infrastructure goes on and off without elevating humidity or temperature. And so a lot of those systems are controlled by AI. And you know, when we take people on tours of our place, the sort of nerd in me is disappointed because they always get excited about the plants and the lights and the fans. But really, it's the backplane of IT and AI that's probably made us accelerate more than anyone. Because for the most part, we're governed everywhere we go on not losing cannabis, which means you need to have a chain of custody and a method of data. And then as you want to improve every cycle over every cycle, you have to gather all the inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And so it's kind of like grade 9 science, right? Thesis, and you do that little thing, but we do that all day long in everything.
Right. There's another question here. Mick Lockwood says, are you worried about Aurora?
Listen, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I concluded there was almost nothing to learn by looking behind us. And so functionally, you might as well just remove that feature and get rid of the rearview mirror. Because if you don't know what you want to do and you reflect on others' actions in order to determine yours, that makes you a follower. And so never really been very good at that. And I think the organization we built tends to have an orientation to winning rather than keeping their JOB.
Right.
And so I think Aurora's doing the right thing, right? Like their stock is highly valued for their output. They should use their stock to buy everything because it's almost at no value are you overpaying if what you buy actually gives you an underlying business that wouldn't have otherwise been there.
Wow.
And so like, I don't think they're doing the wrong thing. I just like where we are.
Wow, interesting. Bruce, I've taken a half hour of your time. The questions are just piling in here at a rate so fast that I can't even read them. So let's take a break there. Let's come back when you're in town next. And thanks once again and thank you on behalf of all these people who are watching online right now.
Thank you, and sorry I was late. I always try to respect you because you've been here early.
Well, that's right. I show up every day pretty early.
Hey, you were in my lobby how many years ago telling me about this crazy business idea? I said, that doesn't sound like a business idea. That sounds like an expenditure idea. But I think you've turned it into something, so good for you.
Getting there. Thanks very much. We'll leave it there. We'll come back to you soon. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks very much for watching. If you like that, check out one of these videos on the left or subscribe on the right, or better yet, click on the little bell button on the right and you'll hear a notification from us every time we put up something new.